Hi everybody, I'm Christin Bentley and I'm the State Republican Executive Committee woman from Senate District 1. I serve on the Legislative Priorities Committee and I chaired the subcommittee Stop Sexualizing Texas Kids. And I'm going to give you an update today on our legislative priority and let you know exactly what's going on at this midpoint in the session, which bills we are doing really well on and which ones that we might need to get behind and start rallying now that we're at the midpoint in the session. And so thank you for being here and listening. I'm going to just get started right away with where we're really in good shape. You may have heard that we have several really good bills related to the sexually explicit materials that we're finding in our school libraries. We have HB 900 from Representative Jared Patterson. This bill is a priority of our Speaker Dave Phelan, and it was heard and passed out of committee a few weeks ago. It's a great bill. It is a very strong bill at removing the sexually explicit materials. It has very strong definitions in it for what sexually explicit materials are, and it creates standards for our school libraries that just aren't there yet related to collection and development. And then it also has an enforcement measure in it that we really, really like. It requires that vendors label these materials as sexually explicit and that they cannot sell them, to Texas schools. And then if they do provide sexually explicit materials, school districts can no longer buy from them. It's a really strong bill that, as I said, passed out of committee about a week or two ago, and we know that it's headed for a floor vote. It has bipartisan support, and so we expect that it will get over to the Senate here in a week or two, and so we're just really excited about that bill. I'll keep you posted on that one. We have another bill that just got heard last week over in the Senate, Senate Bill 13, and this one is by Senator Paxton. That bill also addresses the sexually explicit materials in our school libraries. It's a little bit different in its approach than HB 900, and what I love about this bill is that I think it will end up being a really good complement to HB 900. That one is, I know, being worked on right now. It'll have a committee substitute coming out soon that I hope my subcommittee will be able to recommend support for. And so we're just waiting to see that committee substitute come out. But I do anticipate that we're going to be able to recommend that bill as well. Another bill related to stopping the sexualization of Texas kids was heard last week in the House Public Education Committee. It's HB 1507 by Representative Ken King. And what this bill does is prohibits any sort of celebrations around sexual orientation or sexual preference. This bill really tackles those discussions that we're finding in Texas schools that relate to gender ideology and Pride Week and things like that. We really like this bill. The GOP strongly endorses it. It's still in committee pending, and so this is one where I'd like everybody to watch to see what happens this week. And if we don't see it moving out of committee soon, we're going to want you to pick up the phone and call the committee and see what the holdup is, and just ask them to please go ahead and get this bill moved out of committee. We have some really good pornography bills that were just heard yesterday over in the Senate. And the first one is SB 417 by Senator Paxton. And what this bill does is it requires that all cellular devices, so that would include cell phones and tablets that are activated in the state of Texas, that they would default to a porn filter. And so right now what they do when your phone is activated is they default to no filter. And so we want that changed. We want people to have to opt out of that if they don't want it on there. And the reason for that is that porn filters are really actually pretty difficult for a lot of parents to get on the phones to protect their kids, and they're easily deactivated. But we just want that we want all phones activated in the state to come with that automatically. People shouldn't have to opt into that. That's just something that should be there to protect kids. We know that cell phones and other devices like tablets, cellular devices, that they're really ubiquitous now in our culture, including children. And there was a recent study out of Stanford that showed that children, most children by the time they're 11 years old, have a cellular device. And it is porn is just as ubiquitous in our culture now, and we really, really need to do better at protecting children from being exposed to pornography. Most children, when they're first exposed to pornography, it is unwanted exposure. It is something that they didn't seek out. It sought them out, and we need to really, really do everything we can this legislative session to protect children from that. Pornography is extremely harmful to children, and it's associated with mental health decline in children, and it's also associated with violent behavior. And we, again, need to do everything that we can to protect children from this virtual world, Wild West that we have with regard to pornography. And so we really strongly support 417. SB 417. We also really strongly support SB 2021, which was also heard yesterday in State Affairs. And this is another bill by Senator Paxton. And what this one does is it creates age verification for online pornography, or requires that in the state of Texas, that anyone who's accessing pornography online would have to show a government-issued ID or other very stringent form of identification. This is a bill that is common sense, and it's modeled after legislation that was just passed and enacted into law in Louisiana this year. We know that it stands up and that it's constitutional. Pornhub, day one, Pornhub complied with the Louisiana law, and this one is modeled after that. The bill has enforcement, and we love that, both civil and criminal enforcement. It also, what makes Senator Paxton's bill a little bit different is that it doesn't just require age verification, it also requires that the porn industry puts warnings on their sites about porn addiction, and then a helpline where people can get help for porn addiction. Pornography is extremely addictive, and porn addiction is actually becoming epidemic in our country. About 8%, estimated 8% of adults are addicted to online pornography. So we're going to expect that both of these bills get voted out of committee really quickly, but we're going to keep our eyes on that for next week. We're expecting that they will get voted out of committee next week. So we have another bill, SB 1562, that was heard in the Senate Criminal Justice Committee on Tuesday, April 4th. And so this bill is another one that our subcommittee recommended support of, and that the SREC just voted to endorse. And what it does is it makes it a criminal offense in the state of Texas to sexually groom a child. And it seems like that would already be in our laws, but it's not. And so this is a really important bill at protecting children from sexualization, from predators who, especially in the digital world, are really going after kids and grooming them for later sexual physical acts of abuse. And so this really goes after a very specific kind of sexual abuse. And this is a bill that we really need to pass this session. What's interesting about this one, and actually a lot of our bills that are related to stopping the sexualization of Texas kids, is that they have bipartisan support. And this bill it was voted out of committee. It was heard and voted out of the committee on the same day, and it was unanimous in its support, 7-0. And over in the House, the companion to this bill is actually filed by a Democrat, and that's Representative Senfronia Thompson. And so these bills that relate to child trafficking and sexualization of kids, don't be surprised that you're going to see that we have a lot of bipartisan support behind them. Reasonable Texans, the mamas and daddy bears out there, they don't want children harmed and sexualized. And so we're just, I know as a committee, we're really thrilled that these bills are getting bipartisan support. So keep your eyes on Senate Bill 1562. It should be put on their calendar over in the Senate shortly, and it should easily pass out of the Senate. So we have another bill, Senate Bill 12, that over in the Senate, this was heard just last week. It's on our intent calendar in the Senate. And this is a bill that's written by Senator Hughes, and it's the drag show bill that is moving. None of the other drag show bills have moved yet, but this Senate Bill 12, it is the only one that the RPT has endorsed. It is such a strong piece of legislation. It defines what is a sexual performance or drag-related performance. It has a really strong definition, which some of the early bills that were filed, their definitions were a little too broad, and so this one is very specific. It also prohibits any sort of drag show performance on public property. And this bill has a penalty that is civil and criminal. When it comes to the drag performances or so-called family-friendly drag shows in the state of Texas, we are still seeing these pop up all over the state. We just had one in Amarillo that was on public grounds. We have one coming up in New Braunfels that we just were made aware of. And so this is legislation that we really need in order to protect Texas children. And so keep your eye on Senate Bill 12. Again, we think it's going to pass easily out of the Senate, and then we want to get some momentum behind this bill when it gets over into the House. Now, an important part of our legislative priority is repealing the obscenity exemption, which is really an affirmative defense in our Penal Code 43.24, which relates to harmful materials. And there's currently an affirmative defense that allows allows harmful materials to be distributed to children for educational purposes and judicial and legislative and law enforcement purposes. And so we have a lot of bills that were actually filed to repeal this affirmative defense. And some of them repeal it in its entirety, and then some of them just amend the language to still include for law enforcement purposes. And so we have several bills that we have endorsed, and you can go on to the Texas GOP website to see specifically which ones they are. I can give you some names or some bill numbers here. On the House side, we have HB 552, HB 571, HB 858, HB 869. We have HB 976, HB 111, and HB 1253. And so these bills all relate to that affirmative defense. And we also have Senate bills that were filed related to this as well. So Senate Bill 437 and Senate Bill 395. And then we have Senate Bill 828, which I'm going to talk about in just a minute. And so these bills, we have not seen any of them be scheduled for a hearing. Most of them are in, on the House side, they're all over in State Affairs. And on the Senate side, they're in criminal justice. And so we need to get some of these bills scheduled for a hearing. And so that's, we are midway in our session. Things are moving so quickly, and if these bills don't get scheduled for a hearing, then it's unlikely that we'll be able to pass this legislation. And so that's one of the things that we'll be sending a call to action out on is getting these bills scheduled for a hearing. There is a Senate Bill 828, and what this one does, it's written by Senator Hall and filed by Senator Hall, and it has a House companion bill filed by Representative Toth. And this bill goes beyond just removing the affirmative defense, and what it does is it actually amends the language in our current penal code and redefines what harmful materials are. And we love this bill because what it does is it takes out two loopholes that allow these explicit materials to be legal to distribute to children. And it takes out some of the key words that it takes out is taken as a whole and utterly without social redeeming value. And I really want us to get behind SB 828 because we know that authors who are writing materials that are essentially erotica about children and marketed to children get away with it. They get away with these sexualized materials because of the loopholes in harmful materials definition. And so we know that this is an important thing to do that would have very far-reaching consequences to those who are sexualizing our children and distributing these materials to children. And so we want to definitely put pressure on our legislators to get Senate Bill 828 scheduled for a hearing, and to even look at possibly using that language and amending other bills that could include a change to the definition. So that's pretty much where we're at right now in the legislative session with regard to stopping the sexualization of Texas kids. Of course, there's a lot more that's happened that we're pleased with, and but these are some of the most important things right now in the midpoint on April 4th as I come to you. And so I just want to leave you with some encouraging words and some direction on what we need you to do. I will tell you that we have a lot of momentum behind bills relating to protecting children from sexualization. And that, in a large part, is because of the action of people like you who are picking up your phones and making those calls and sending emails and making public comment over in the House. When HB 900 was heard, we had a whole lot of mama and daddy bears down there to testify, and that was awesome. But one of the things that was so remarkable was that we had 364 pages of public comment on that bill. Thousands of people who overwhelmingly support HB 900 were able to give their opinion in that way. And I will tell you, that gets attention. That gets so much attention. They are listening, and there is momentum behind this bill because of how involved the grassroots have gotten on these issues. And so I want to encourage you to use the tools that we have at Grassroots Priorities. Grassroots Priorities makes it easy, makes it so convenient to send your emails and just continue to follow those calls to action and use those tools. You can also go to the Texas GOP website and you can get updates on our legislative priorities there. You can sign up for Jill Glover, our chair of legislative priorities, her weekly report, and that's a really good way to know what's going on all of our legislative priorities. It is just incredible what the grassroots can do when we get involved. And so I just want to encourage you to continue to stay involved in the legislative session and make your voices heard, because I would say that this is one of those sessions where we're hearing that a lot of Texans are getting involved. I just want to close with this, that there is nothing better than working on issues related to protecting Texas children and families. Our children are so important to our future, and I know that I don't have to tell you this, but they are, and we have got to protect them. This is the session to do that. And I have no doubt that we are going to pass a package of bills that protects kids for decades to come in our state. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being involved. Keep up the good work.